I'll be talking about automated checks before publishing open source code. I think most of the people on the call already know me. I know you, but for the people looking back the stream on the internet as well, I work at Alliander. I work there as a technical solution lead, and also part of my time is spent at the open source program office of Alliander as an open source ambassador. I'm focused a lot on the compliance side, and that's also why this checking and of open source projects come from. And Alliander is a distribution system operator, a grid operator in the Netherlands. So for about a third of the Netherlands, we distribute electricity and gas. That means connecting households, connecting businesses, and the energy transition, of course, right? Changing to renewables is something that hits us, impacts us really hard. We have to digitize. And that's when about 2018, we said, okay, we're not going to do this alone. We are looking to leverage the open source approach. And that's when we established an OSPO. And over the years, we've published a number of projects, some of them more successful as others, but we see collaboration with these projects. And here's an overview of some of those projects. And each and every time you have a project, many of them started as something we already had in place internally. You have to go through this process of taking an internal project with some history and making it ready to become an open source project. And over the years, we sort of refined a process, and this is some of the aspects where we look into. So the general considerations on the left, then what is the business case? That doesn't mean that every project has to have a real solid business case, but especially the ones where we have seek long-term engagement, then there has to be sort of this funding, the management has to commit, and there has to be a roadmap of what we want to achieve. And these are very much procedural things you cannot check for. But then we get into the details of the project in terms of the code base, where we do a legal assessment. How is it done with the licenses of the libraries used? Is there make sure the license is applied correctly, and there might be some trademarks involved. Then more technical assessment, make sure there's no sensitive information in there, like test data with not really good information, or passwords, configuration of infrastructure. We do a check of the code quality, and we make sure that the code is documented, and also the process, like the governance and the code of conduct. I'll come back to that later. And then the governance and the process, make sure there's some infrastructure in place, that there's communication channels, like a technical steering committee, perhaps. And then, of course, we launch it, and we try to grow the community. That's the general thing. I'm interested also to hear from you. We can do that in the chat, I guess, when I'm presenting, what kind of tools, automation you use to check when you have an internal project and you make it an open source project, so we can collectively crowdsource the knowledge. So I'll continue presenting what we have at Alliander. So we automated some of the checks. So what we actually did is we took existing tools, added some configuration to it, and automated that in a GitHub Actions workflow. This means that you could run the individual tools, but it's just something that helps us in the process of reviewing a project. So somebody comes to us, goes to this, also the checklist with the general aspects of making an open source project, and then we can kick off this workflow. We instantly get feedback of things that might need improvement. We can give that back to the team, and if they say in 1 or 2 days, oh, we improved upon it, we can run another check and see if it's good enough or if there's any outstanding issues. And we open sourced it last year. So you can also go to the URL and find it and use it. Somebody else in the Netherlands, in announcing this presentation, said, "Oh, can you run it on GitLab?" Well, all the tools are there, so you could move it over to GitLab, but at the moment it's just a GitHub workflow. And you see on the top, you see some of the symbols when I go over all the individual checks. But it's a legal check. It has to involve license information, security. We do some things with language checks as well, or code quality, or the deployment process. Let's go over them one by one. There's about 6 of them. So first, regarding legal checks, we check for the copyright and license annotations with reuse. If you don't know, reuse is a standard and checking tool by the Free Software Foundation Europe, and it adopts the model of the SPDX, with a file copyright text and license identifiers per file, to make sure that each and every file in the project actually has a license and a copyright notice attached to it. And we like the brevity as well, rather than having 10 lines, maybe exaggerating a bit, but have 10 lines in each and every file, because we heard that developers don't like it that much, but this is something they say, okay, we can work with that. So we use the reuse tool to check for that. And the check, for example, gives this output. So you see, in this case, it's not satisfactory. You see there's missing copyright and license information because the workflow doesn't have copyright and licensing information. The README doesn't. And it also gives a nice summary of the licenses that are used and a total overview. I think this text is from an earlier version, so there's even more concrete steps, suggestions now on what the developers can do to improve this. Then another more legal check is as also Thomas suggested, where we use open source review toolkit to check what are actually the dependencies that are being used in the project. And in this review, we now use the default org config that is available, which has various rules on licenses, and make sure that it's actually a known license that is actually open source, I guess. But of course, you could bring your own check for whatever you like. And this results in a number of files, this check, this automation, like an SBOM. But is very interesting is to have the web app, because this is a screenshot or two screenshots of the web app, and this is a single page that includes the JavaScript and the images and the data. And so you can open it in your web browser and click through, get some diagrams of all the dependencies that are defined in the project, and look if it's all okay. Then a third one is about the structure and the information that is in the repository, and we use the repo linter of it. It's actually a to-do group project. I think it's needs some love, to put it that way. So maybe there's a call out to get the to-do group community active on maintaining and improving the repo linter. But it's a very nice framework to define certain checks you want to run on the repository. So say the obvious ones, and there's also a list in there. The obvious ones are, is there a README? Is there a security.nd file? Is there something about the license in the README? Maybe is there a copy contact information? But there's a set of rules you can configure yourself. So you can go crazy with this and do very elaborate checks. Then you get this kind of output. And besides just a yes and no, you can also trigger a warning. So if you have something that you say, oh, this might be interesting for some projects, but not for all, you can just throw a warning. And maybe it's good to know that the way we configure the code scanner is to have as many findings as possible. So we'd rather have a false positive, right? A false finding, and say, okay, we ignore this, rather than not detecting it and finding out when it's actually published. Now, for the security checks, of course, we want to make sure there's no passwords in there, no API keys whatsoever. There's multiple tools that can check for that, including GitHub itself. We use TruffleHog in this workflow, and you give it the repository, it can check it out by itself even, and it looks per commit if there's any secret. There's quite a things you can do to configure it, whether it checks all the commits or just the present state. It can search for various kinds of secrets. Another security check is the OpenSSF scorecard. Which is also good because the OpenSSF scorecard is also used, say for GitHub, you can use it as a sort of a ranking to know if a project or a dependency is of a good quality in terms of security. So if you put something out there, you'd rather have a good rating for the OpenSSF scorecard, and it checks a variety of things, and it gives you a score, like on high school. Right, so you get and this is an example, you get an aggregate score, and it checks various aspects. So it says, are there any binary artifacts? So there's people that put in Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, zip files, and especially these binary things can contain some malicious content, or are hard to analyze. So it's considered bad practice. So you get points removed if you have any binaries in your repository. And it says something about the branch protection to make sure that only authorized persons can actually commit to certain branches. Whether there's code reviews being done, if there's a good number of contributors, and so various checks that are actually being maintained in the OpenSSF project. Then nowadays it's also good to check for the wording that is used. especially if you're not an English native speaker. You might use some appropriate words. And we use the Woke tool as it's a small program in Go that you can feed a whole list of checks in YAML to check for certain words that are considered insensitive. Of course, here's some examples with blacklist and whitelist. These are some of the checks that are already built in. But as a project for the Open Source Summit 2023, I created a whole list of insensitive checks, non-inclusive language checks you want to run based on various resources, which is very extensive, maybe a bit too much, but at least we get various findings of words that might have to be changed. And more general regarding writing style is a project called Veil, which can get dictionaries of rules to check for. So we use the Red Hat style guide, So it checks for very phrasing that is taking too many words. It checks for typos. So it checks a variety of things based on the Red Hat, but there's also other style guides. I think there's one by Microsoft, one by Google that have been contributed to the Veil project. And another of those configurations is Alex, which checks for insensitive and inconsiderate writing. It is less limited than the rules we have programmed in Woke at the moment, but it also does a good job. And this is some of the output you can get, right? All of the tools can produce this output also on the command line if you run them individually. But you get an overview per file of and a line and a place in the line where something is wrong. These are some of the Google rules. So that was an overview of the checks we actually implemented in this GitHub action. And I hope it gives some inspiration of that you A, can automate it, and B, of some of the checks you can adopt. You can also run them, as said, individually just from the command line. And at the moment, this is something like, where can you run this? We only check pre-release. So we have a new project, and before releasing that, we wanna check. But I can see this automation happen in a similar vein just afterwards, periodically, maybe, right? It's every month or maybe once a year in a review process. You run these automated checks to make sure that everything is still in order. And also, some of these checks already provide means to automate it inside the project, or you could do that with a pre-commit hook even. So that the project embeds it in their continuous integration. They have continuous checking rather than you as the OSPO having to check for it. And I think that was it. Here's some contact information, how to reach us.
We would like to promote also our event here that we plan in Stuttgart in April. So I will share the link here in the chat. Where we would also have a process track. So where ideally this is really meant as not, hey, I come there and I consume some talks, but it's about working, right? And also with a hackathon or something like that on conference part, so that we really can use the time to work our things together and bring some beef to this bones here with the guide. I also invited now, so here Sven is also now in the line, your colleague, who is also very experienced in that, so that we also potentially can invite others. I think I added last time already in one of the comments the stuff that we're doing in the ChaosCon unconference. So I think this would be a low-hanging fruit, because then we could just put that stuff already in the chapters. But what is, I think, missing is also this kind of one pager that says, okay, well, this is what we want to do. So they thank you for doing this, because now Anna, she prepared that kind of already. Yeah, so that everyone knows and can be invited easily and say, okay, there's some benefit in doing this. Also, what we did internally, and I don't know for those, I think we put that in the comments once, but I think that's the important starting point here in the Mozilla archetypes, this open source goals, right? especially for you internally, but this is something I think that we should also base upon here, because at the end, this is also what Nico said. Okay, why should we contribute or build up a new activity, right? So there should be also something that you can convince your management that need to invest and sponsor this stuff. So I'm really looking forward. So with the event as also kind of again sparking this activity again, but also for the preparation, everyone is invited to to bring their ideas. And also, I think you made another slide, right? To say, okay, we would look for how did you call it? I think that's the next one to have here. No, the other one here. Yeah, chairs. Yeah, for the specific chapters and so on, so that we can really have someone who invites for that. That would be great.
I only want to share that we are working on preparing a standard for writing content, and I want to special thanks to Jan van den Berg for support us on this special issue that we are working. Alice and I we will meet next Tuesday to talk about special things that we are working. Maybe we have more good things to share next encounter. So that is so if someone have interest, we are working on this issue especially, and so that's all.